What's going on, y'all? I'm Cambest, and once again, I asked for your Marvel Snap hot takes, and I got an overwhelming response. Let's take a look at the best of your hot takes. And Galactus shouldn't have been nerfed. This take was probably the most popular take that I saw in my hot takes acquiring post, right? When I'm like, oh, everyone give me your hot takes. I saw more people saying Galactus shouldn't have been nerfed. Galactus was fine. People who complain about Galactus are whiners. It was totally fine. And I just don't understand where that comes from, because I guess I don't know which Galactus you're talking about. If you're talking about 6-2 Galactus that doesn't care if you're winning, that card absolutely should have been nerfed. That card should never have existed, without question. It is an extremely obnoxious kind of card to exist in a game like this. It is the kind of card that demands you include counterplay in your deck or lose immediately in a way that is not actually playing Marvel Snap. Like, even if you look at something like Loki, which demands counterplay or being built your deck around that specific matchup, you still are playing Marvel Snap when you play against Loki. You are just playing a completely different game when you are playing against Galactus, and I think it is entirely reasonable for people who signed up to play Marvel Snap and built a deck to do a specific thing to feel upset when they're not playing the same game anymore. And I think that is the main driver of why people don't like Galactus and why he is kept on such a short leash by Second Dinner. And I think that is a good thing, because I am one of those people. I think there are people out there who are big fans of playing Galactus and feeling in control and being like, look, just I did this to you, stay in and let me get my Eliath cubes. But I just don't think that that is something they want to be. I'm not saying it can't exist. Galactus can exist. But I don't think they want that play pattern to be the dominant one in a game that is built on snapping and retreating. I think it kind of flattens the dynamic of snapping and retreating. And interestingly, I think that's kind of a thing people like about it, because I think a lot of players from other card games aren't used to the snap and retreat dynamic, and Galactus sort of flattens that out, makes it very easy to deal with. You don't really have to think about it a lot. You just have to do it when you're doing the thing and not do it when you're not doing the thing. And I think that that is a lot of what people enjoyed about him. And I do think there should be more decks that make that easy. I will say that. I do think there should be more decks that make it easy to do that. I just don't think those decks should be Galactus. I've never felt mad at any card since I started playing. I've genuinely had only fun since I've started playing. And that's with me having over 3 years of consistent TCG experience. That's dope, dude. That's awesome to hear. I think that people tend to read discussions of balance and saying a card is overtuned as, like complaints that invalidate a game being good. I get a lot of people, like, not a lot of people, but like some people will go on my videos where I talk about balance and how so-and-so is too strong or whatever. And be like, oh, content creators just love complaining about this game. Just sit there and enjoy it. And it's like, well, there are balance problems in the game, and that's normal, right? Like, I think people sort of read that stuff as like fundamental threats to the game. And that's not really how I ever intend it to come off. I always want it to be, hey, this is a problem, but like, obviously I trust them to fix it, or I wouldn't be making the video in the first place, right? Like, if I didn't think that they would, listen and be thinking about the same sort of things, there's no benefit in me making a video like that. So I think that, yeah, Marvel Snap on the whole is a fun and balanced game. I think that most of the real sort of like existential questions the game has, for someone like me at least, there's like, okay, you're charging people a decent chunk of change. And I think that is something that's like much more concerning than like any, given 3-week long metagame, right? I think people focus way too much on the 3-week long metagame and way too little on like the economy of Marvel Snap, honestly. Low cost cards that fit into any deck with no synergy requirements causes too much homogenization in 12 cards decks and is Snap's biggest current issue. Nico, Nebula, Jeff, Elsa, Cage, Mobius. Oh, I don't know if that's Snap's biggest current issue. Like I said in the previous answer, I feel like the biggest current issue that Marvel Snap faces, and the biggest issue it will always face, is monetization. But in terms of balance, I don't necessarily think that's true. I think a lot of those cards that you mentioned actually are carried by Elsa Bloodstone, because normally there's a punish for just playing a 2/3 on turn 2, but when you're playing Elsa Bloodstone, you actually just need bodies, and so there's no punish, so you just put a body in your deck. You don't really care what the numbers it has on it. You care that sometimes it'll give you a free win. And I think, you'd see those cards without Elsa too, but probably not in the same numbers. I think Jeff actually exists in a sort of special category from those other ones, because Jeff is just sort of straight up the best in-slot card, but that's not bad, right? It's not bad that there's a card that people know they get and it'll be good, right? And I think how this stuff interacts with the economy is actually an important aspect to touch on, because Jeff is traditionally just like, this is the safest purchase in the game. Like, you get Jeff, you're going to play him in everything. And I think it's good that that exists, right? Because if there's not cards that, like, if you get this card, you're going to play it in everything, it makes it there's like a decision paralysis that can be created, right? One of the main things people like to ask is like, hey, KM, I have 6,000 tokens. Do I buy card X or card Y? And that's not a question I can answer without knowing what other cards they have, unless that card is Jeff, in which case you buy Jeff, right? Like, and I think there's some value, like, there's nothing wrong with a card being the best in its slot. There's nothing wrong with that. It makes those decisions easier, and I think that's probably okay. I just think, if a card is going to be best in slot, obviously I would prefer if it was more of a Dr. Doom than a Jeff, because Doom is free and Jeff is not. Shang-Chi should have won over Human Torch. I just wanted to use this as an opportunity to talk about, like Marvel Snap, social media, all of that. What they're referencing here is the variant vote. There was a free variant that people were being able to be given for voting in the anniversary vote. And there was a Shang-Chi that everyone just sort of assumed would win because it's a good card and it was a cute variant. And so a group of players on Marvel Snap, highly invested ones, were like, no, we should vote for Human Torch, hashtag Team Torch, etc., etc. And that was like fun. It was cool. I think, for the record, my opinion was I don't really care, but either of the Series 3 cards winning is probably better for the economy of the game. If for any new player, getting the free Series 3 card is probably just better. I think that's generally how I approached it. But I was just sort of looking on this as like, okay, why are they caring about this? I don't really know why they care so much. It kind of became a meme, right? It was like they were having fun. And then, like, a day after the vote, it turns out that, like, people had been saying mean things about the artist of the Shang-Chi variant, who, for the record, is one of my, like, favorite artists in Marvel Snap, so a little bit biased. But I guess I just wanted to say, like, one of the things that I've learned being a niche internet micro celebrity is you're exactly well known enough for a decent amount of people to have an opinion of you, but not so well known that you have other people running your social media and you don't see that shit, right? And I think one of the things that I've learned is, like, I honestly am. I'm the kind of person who, like, I'll see the negative stuff and it'll hit me a lot heavier than the positive stuff will. And I work to manage that. But I just wanted to say that, maybe think about the other person on the side of your comments if you can. And obviously, I failed in this before. And that's how it goes. Like, failure is human. You just got to try to do better. But I think that, one of the things about having a platform is of this size, which is to say a very small one, but one that I'm grateful for nevertheless, is that you get to know a lot of people's opinions about you with no filter. And not all of those opinions are complimentary, and a lot of the bad ones really do stick with you. And so if you're someone who's just, like, saying stuff on the internet for funsies, I would suggest considering that, like, if you're talking about someone, maybe don't be like overly rude in the way that I saw people were being about this artist. It definitely, it felt like it crossed a line for me, certainly, where like if I saw this stuff about me, I would be so upset. And I do think that, especially given that this artist has been like one of the few that like acknowledges Snap as a community and has been involved in the Snap community, it sort of sucks to give the impression that the Snap community is this. And I understand people are going to be like, oh, well, you can't judge the whole community by that. But it's like, again, I've been in that situation, and I can tell you the bad stuff lingers more than it doesn't. So if you're someone who's leaving comments like that, just keep that in mind. The community is way too trigger happy when calling for nerfs on powerful cards. I mean, that just seems like a subjective viewpoint, right? I would disagree with that. I think what makes discourse around Marvel Snap tough for me is people who say opinions like facts and then just sort of go from there. And I understand the irony of that. This whole video is me doing that. I get it. That's the joke. But I do think that there is a lot of this is a fact in Marvel Snap discourse that is not necessarily backed up by reality, right? Like, people love to state things forcefully. That's a consequence of the internet. It's a consequence of Twitter. It's a consequence of social media. I get it. But I think far more worrying than content creators calling for nerfs. And I do understand how, like, if you're someone who watches content creators and you see them calling for nerfs and then you see those nerfs happen, you're like, oh my God, that just happened because they cried about it. But the order is usually the other way around, right? The content creator is crying about it because it actually is a problem, and then it gets nerfed because it actually is a problem. And the content creator, the person who spends 8 hours a day playing a dumb mobile game, was probably just a little bit in tune with that in a way that you might not have been. But I don't think that's always true. I do think that there are certain content creators who can get like over whiny, where it's just like, oh, this is so obviously broken. Why aren't they doing anything about this? But I think, honestly, there's like this sort of pervasive cynicism around second dinner's balance decisions, where the baseline assumption is they don't care about balance, they care about money. And I don't think that there's anything they can do to get rid of that, unfortunately. And I wonder how much that perception influences the idea that, like, you know, oh, they're just colluding with the content creators to like drive the hype machine or whatever, right? Like, I wonder about that, because it's not explicitly stated, but it's just something that whenever I see that this kind of take pop up, not this specific take, just this kind of take, I wonder about it sometimes. Like, are there people out there who think that Second Dinner's goal is to like milk them of all their money, and that content creators are part of this by driving the hype train and by, you know, whining for nerfs so that new powerful cards can get released? Is that what this is getting at? I'd like to know. The infinite rank system isn't really a showcase of just skill. It's a huge time investment to enter infinite and grind the ladder. For players with a normal life, it's nearly impossible to get into the top 500. Maybe. I think this is sort of true in any game where a grind is part of the ladder experience, and like that's sort of any game with a ladder, right? But at the same time, if you're not invested enough in the game to get to infinite, you probably aren't that good either. And obviously, like, there are exceptions, right? But I think people think of skill in Marvel Snap as something that exists independent of work. And, you know, certain people are better at card games than others, but it's not something that exists independent of work. Like, you still have to put in effort and play a lot of games to get good at something. And in fact, I would say the number one thing you can do to improve in Marvel Snap is play more Marvel Snap. And I think that's true of most games. I think most people get too bogged down in theory crafting and thinking of things like that, then they would be benefited more by just playing and trying to learn. But I think, if like, a Magic champion is not playing enough Marvel Snap to hit infinite, then yeah, they might have a case. But if you, normal person with a normal life and a normal job, are not playing enough Marvel Snap to hit infinite, but you probably wouldn't be someone who's pushing those high ranks until you started playing enough Marvel Snap to get as good enough to push those high ranks, right? Like, I don't necessarily think it's the worst thing on earth, right? It's not like, I do think there are people with potential that otherwise wouldn't, that are otherwise unable to do so, but I don't really have an idea for a better system, right? Like, those same people would get left behind if you did paid tournaments. They'd get left even more behind, right? If you look at Magic, like, you look at like the disparity in the amount of tournaments North America gets versus like South America, and then you look at someone like Paulo Vitor da Rosa, who succeeded dramatically despite those limitations, and you wonder how many other potential Paulos were there that were like culled out of the system by those limitations. God only knows. And so, like, yeah, ladder's not great. There, I could talk about why ladders suck forever, but I do think that for the most part, if you aren't playing enough games to get top 500, I'm not sure if you would be top 500. And I maybe I'm off base. I don't really know. But I do think that, like, especially if you're not playing enough games to hit infinite, maybe you wouldn't be top 500. You know what I mean? No one actually plays Marvel Snap. It's a solo game, and everyone else you come across are bots. True. I hate that Cyclops has to be evolved to use the blasters, which is literally his whole thing. Yes! This sucks so bad. This actually sucks so bad because I get it. The argument is like, you need some cards that are iconic in Marvel Snap that aren't actually very good. Like, because you need to give a player a vanilla card so they can understand how to make that card better and how to improve their deck building. I totally understand that. They do that with Shocker and Cyclops, or Shocker and Sentinel in the tutorial. It makes perfect sense. But the fact that they used Cyclops' eye laser animation for evolved Cyclops does tilt me. There should be an anime. Like, come on, that's his whole thing. Like, I'm not even saying it has to not be Cyclops, but like, you put the laser animation in there, and you only get it when he teams up with High Evolutionary. Hate it. All right, y'all. That's gonna be it from me. As always, I've been Cam Best. Thank you so much for contributing your hot takes to this video. I really, really appreciate it. I love doing these little hot takes videos. They're so fun for me. So thank you so much. As always, remember, like and subscribe, especially if you like that video. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I will see you in the next one.